County portions of Manassas and then into Brentsville and Nokesville. And the reason we're here today is we wanted to discuss this issue of the military deployment of U.S. Naval Reserve Commander Gil Trenum, who also represents the Brentsville Magisterial District on the Prince William County School Board. And so today we wanted to talk about that. As you well know, because many of you have covered it, there has been considerable press coverage of this and discussion, and yet we have not discussed this yet from our perspective as Virginia state legislators. And so what I'd like to do today is to do precisely that and let you know our position on this. The agenda that I'd like to follow essentially is I will outline the issue for you, then any delegate or senator who wishes to speak will have the opportunity. And if any of our veterans who are here wish to speak, you are invited to do so. And then we will move into a question and answer period. So my interest in this is that along with Senator Bryce Reeves, I chair the General Assembly Military and Veterans Caucus. That is the clearinghouse for the veterans and military legislation that transits the General Assembly and then makes its way into committee for action. And in that way, we represent 800,000 Virginians who have the title of veteran. And so we all have a vested interest. And so what I want to do real quickly is I'd like, you know all these people personally, I think, but I'd like to put this into context. First of all, Delegate Scott Lingenfelter represents the 31st House District, and he will follow me and others will follow him in speaking. Scott spent 30 years in the cloth of the country and retired from the United States Army as a full colonel. He gets it. We also have Colonel Dick Black, who has worn the uniform, now tell me if I get this wrong, Dick, but as a Marine officer and an Army officer, correct? Served in Vietnam, wore the uniform for, I think your bio said 32 years, and retired as a full colonel. Mark Dudenheffer represents Prince William and part of Stafford, spent 30 years in a military uniform, and retired from the United States Marine Corps as a full colonel. Sergeant Tim Hugo, Majority Caucus Chair, spent time in the Army uniform of our country and has been a very active supporter of veterans issues. Delegate Jackson Miller spent time in the United States Army Active Force and the National Guard, is that correct? Army Reserve, achieving the rank of captain. We also have Delegate Bob Marshall, who is not a veteran but has a deep interest in this because he is part of this delegation, has been a deep and long-lasting supporter of all things military and veteran. And so we also have with us Supervisor Janine Lawson of the Brentsville District. This, of course, concerns the Brentsville District, and we thought it appropriate to have Janine here. We also have 4 military veterans who do not hold elective office, and I will just very quickly introduce them. We, of course, have Mr. Steve Botello, who is very active in the VFW, the American Legion, the Disabled American Veterans. And then we have Mr. George McKay, United States Marine Corps, retired in the red shirt. Welcome, sir. Mr. Rick Terrell, United States Marine Corps, retired of the Gulf War. Thank you for being here. And then Kurt Ashpole, United States Marine Corps, retired also from the Gulf War. So I think we're kind of Marine intensive today. So thanks to all of you for being here. You will note that school board member, Navy Reserve Commander Gil Trenum is not here. And that is because he is at Joint Base Andrews today, engaged in pre-deployment processing before he leaves for his assignment in Djibouti, Africa. And so he is not with us. Now, the question before us, and let me outline that because I wish to share with all of you precisely the legal guidance we have received as a delegation to the Virginia General Assembly. And it's simply this. Mr. Trenum came to me when he first received notification, which was unexpected for him and his family, that he would be deployed to Djibouti, Africa, and he leaves somewhere in the next week to 10 days for a 1-year deployment. And he asked me to do some research with the Division of Legislative Services, because he lives in the 51st House District that I represent, and of course chair the Military and Veterans Caucus. And so I went to the Division of Legislative Services, which is an agency of Virginia state government, and they do a number of things. They draft our bills, they advise members of the General Assembly. It is a nonpartisan agency. They understand the legislative history of virtually every piece of legislation that we have passed in modern times. And so for that reason, we went to them and asked them what the legal basis for this is. And so what I'm going to do now is I'd like to look at the email and share with you precisely what they said so that I get this right. I do not wish to misspeak. It is covered by the Code of Virginia, and it provides that no county or municipal officer shall forfeit his title to office or vacate the same by reason of being called to active duty in the armed forces of the United States. End quote. That's exactly what the code says. It is also buttressed by two Attorney General of Virginia opinions, one issued in 2002, one in 2004. The 2002 opinion had to do with a county treasurer in the Commonwealth who had been called to active duty in his reserve capacity. And the Division of Legislative Services attorneys said, "We conclude that the clear intent of this section did not require a county treasurer who was a member of the organized reserves of the United States to relinquish his office when involuntarily called to active military duty." That's the first Attorney General of Virginia opinion. The second, in 2004, had to do with the Board of Supervisors position. They looked at the code in the Division of Legislative Services, and this time the situation, as I said, was dealing with a member of a Board of Supervisors. The opinion concluded that the member had the discretion regarding whether he provided ample notice to the Board of Supervisors, and the office is not vacated unless and until he provides his notice. So to summarize, and this is the words of the staff attorney in the Division of Legislative Services. 1, the school board member is not required to vacate his office. 2, the school board member is not required to provide notice of his call to service to the school board. Because when they do, that triggers a process by which the school board can appoint a temporary replacement who steps aside until the deployed reservist holding the publicly elected office returns and resumes his or her seat. 3, there is no vacancy unless and until he does provide notice to the school board. 4, the school board cannot make a temporary appointment if the member does not provide notice. If the school board member does provide notice to school board, the school board is required to make a temporary appointment to perform his duties. And then lastly, the temporary appointee would only serve until the school board member returns from his active duty service. So that is what I have received from the Division of Legislative Services. They also sent me a subsequent email. I won't prolong this by getting into the details of that, but it establishes other intent by the General Assembly that supports exactly what I have said regarding this. And so that is what I have now. I do not have paper copies with me, but anyone here, member of the media or otherwise, if you would like to actually get a copy of this, if you'll let me know, I will be happy to provide that to you within the next couple of hours as soon as we leave here, so that you can see precisely what was said. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to turn this over to some of my colleagues to speak to this matter. But let me just say this as I do so. On Monday morning, Senator Bryce Reeves and I went to Fort Belvoir at 10 a.m. for the deployment ceremony for the 29th Infantry Division that is deploying, as we now speak, to the Middle East. That's a custom in the United States Army to recognize those military members and their families at the moment of departure, to go to various places on our planet and face conditions of maximum peril. And so Senator Reeves and I went there. There are 80 members of the 29th Infantry Division deploying for 10 months to the Middle East. Needless to say, that exerted considerable stress on the deploying members and on the families. I saw hardened combat soldiers reduced to tears as they hugged their families and they got on the buses and they rolled away. What a privilege to shake their hands, to look in their eyes, and to know their hearts for service for this, the greatest country the world has ever known. And so I particularly regret, as Gil Trenum's representative in the General Assembly, and as someone who has worn the uniform, and I'm sure these gentlemen will feel the same way, that his family has had to prepare for this deployment, enduring those stresses that come with pre-deployment preparation, and at the same time have all these uncertainties introduced in the school board environment. So with that, I would like to turn this over to others to speak, and I'd like to first call on Delegate Scott Lingenfelter, Chairman of the Militia Police and Public Safety Committee of the Virginia House of Delegates.
Thank you very much for coming out today. You know, this is sort of a remarkable thing. And you've got citizen legislators who served their nation. And we're not here for partisan reasons. We're not. We're here because we're genuinely concerned about the treatment of a patriot. You've got gentlemen here, you have retirees who have worn the cloth of the country. They're concerned. You have the Brentsville supervisor here. She's concerned because many of her constituents overlap this case. You have the dean of our delegation here in Prince William, Delegate Marshall, who himself is not a veteran, but he's been a warrior for veterans. And I think the one thing that unifies all of us this morning is that Gil Trenum didn't wake up one morning and say, gee, I've got a great idea. Call me up and send me to go fight terrorism. His country had that idea. His country called him forth. And he has answered that call. And as Rich has laid out to you, there's a schema to deal with this. And I believe that the school board should, in good faith, follow the good tradition of appointing someone that Gil feels will look after the constituents that elected him. The trouble that we are seeing right now in this process is the completely unnecessary injection of partisanship into this process with the potential to be very disruptive. Now, the last thing I think we need from the school board, whose charge, the people working this building, good people, whose charge is to look after the education of the children of this county. Not to create a froth of partisanship that takes the focus completely away from what needs to be done to educate children, what needs to be done to take care of teachers, what needs to be done to keep Prince William's school system truly one of the top systems in the state. That's a fact. That's a fact. I have been in elective office for 16 years, and one of the great things about representing Prince William in the tradition of Chuck Colgan, in the tradition of John Jenkins, in the tradition of many Democrats and Republicans alike, is we have deferred in many, many cases the temptation to be partisan, when our focus, in fact, should be on the citizens who live in this county. I call on the school board today to do the right thing, support Gil Trenum's recommendations, and let that man go forward and serve his country to fight terrorism, and then to come back here and resume his duties to the people who elected him. At this time, I'd like to, if it's all right with you, Delegate Anderson, to pitch to Delegate Marshall, who is the Dean of the Prince William County delegation.
Thank you, Scott. For 20 years, I represented the Brentsville Magisterial District in the General Assembly, and even now I still represent 4 precincts in Brentsville. The Constitution, the history of Virginia has always been deferential, and rightly so, to those who serve in the military. Right now, if you're stationed in Virginia, you're not even a resident of Virginia, your spouse can receive in-state tuition at a community college. The Constitution of Virginia, Article 4, Section 4, prohibits individuals like myself or Senator Black or any member of the General Assembly from having any office of profit or emolument under the United States government, who is in the employment of such government. Can't be eligible. There's one exception. I think you gentlemen and ladies here know what that exception is. You can be in the reserves and still hold an elective office such as a school board or a supervisor. Why? Because Virginia wants members of the military to be able to serve both their country and their community. When the General Assembly decided to have elected school boards across the Commonwealth, it's my memory that every member of the Prince William delegation supported the election of members of the school board on a non-partisan basis. Now, we got into all kinds of fights, but that was not one of them. You have a nonpartisan election for the school board. This school board should act in a nonpartisan fashion to respect both the law as outlined by Delegate Anderson and the equitable treatment of Commander Trenum. Because if you don't do this, you are going to severely impede or provide obstacles to those members of the military who want to serve both their country and their community. So I strongly urge the members of the school board who are elected as nonpartisans to respect the judgment of Commander Trenum, whose judgment was respected and affirmed by the voters in Brentsville. Please appoint one of those individuals that he has recommended, and I will defer to Senator Black.
Thank you very much. Appreciate all of you being here today. Listen, the Guard and the reserves are the closest thing that we have to citizen soldiers. They do their work back here in our community, and then they're subject to call by their government whenever it's necessary. This is serious, serious business. I was a volunteer as a young man, and I was wounded. My radio man were killed right beside me during one of these battles. This is serious stuff. It's not the kind of thing that you give over to petty political partisanship. And with Gil Trenum, he's being mobilized to backfill as basically a part of there is a great battle that's shaping up for the city of Mosul. This is going to be the most crucial battle against ISIS to date. And forces are moving in that direction, and forces are being mobilized to backfill, and this is where Gil Trenum comes into the picture. There is no doubt that Gil can continue to serve, and he can get on Skype, and he can vote by Skype. But I got to tell you what, when we are in the middle of fighting one of the most important battles on earth today, the idea that this school board is going to require Gil Trenum to get on a stinking Skype machine and to cast his votes by Skype instead of by having real, honest representation for the people of Brentsville District is truly an outrage. And I want to tell you, as somebody whose blood lays all over the battlefields of this country, that I think it stinks. I think we need to turn it around, and this school board needs to show some responsibility. So with that, I'll hand it over to someone who is a little more calm about these things. To Delegate Hugo.
Well, let me turn it over to Colonel Dudenheffer.
I'll be very brief. I started serving in the legislature in 2012. And when I got to Richmond, one of the things that really impressed me was the emphasis on making Virginia the best state in the Union for veterans and for active duty military. We depend so greatly on it for our economy. We have 800,000 veterans. The caucus that Delegate Anderson talked about has as many Democrats on it as Republicans. If you look, probably the single largest block of legislation that goes through has to do with protecting veterans, giving them benefits, acknowledge their service. So I served for 30 years. I was never fortunate enough to get shot at. So I sympathize with those that have to go, their families, and I ask the school board here not to politicize this issue, and let's be the best we can be for the veterans in the state of Virginia. Thanks.
Let me turn it over to Majority Caucus Chair Sergeant Tim Hugo, United States Army.
Hey guys, thank you for coming here, and we're here to support Gil today, not as Republicans or Democrats, but as people. Most of us have been in the military or in the reserves. This could have happened to any of us, and I think the school board. Let's just be real candid. The school board needs to be respectful of Gil Trenum, a man who had the guts to put on the uniform. His family is sacrificing. He's going to Africa for a year. This needs to be respectful of him, but it also needs to be respectful of the constituents who live in his district. And again, this could have happened to any one of us, and that's why we're here today, because this is the right thing to do to fight this battle on behalf of Gil Trenum.
All right, thank you, Delegate Hugo. From Manassas, former Army Captain Jackson Miller.
Thank you, Rich. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming here today. Most of what's needed to be said has been said. I want to focus down on some of the things that were brought up, but I want to put it in a little bit different perspective. We've talked about Commander Trenum numerous times here and the sacrifices he's making and the sacrifices that his family are making. But those of us that aren't in that family and in that household just kind of are looking at this as just a larger school board and political issue. Put yourself in Commander Trenum's shoes. He takes this position incredibly seriously. He takes his position as a commander in the United States Navy Reserve very seriously. But he feels that he has a responsibility to the people in the Brentsville district that elected him. Again, our school board runs under nonpartisan parties. I mean, they don't go under political parties. It's nonpartisan races. Commander Trenum won his race with 98% of the vote in the Brentsville district. Obviously, that means he was unopposed. But the reason he's unopposed is because the voters in his district knew that he was doing a good job and wanted his service as their school board chair, or representative. Now we have a school board chairman in Prince William County that has taken our school board, which has been traditionally and historically nonpartisan, and now we have a chairman that has decided to make it as partisan, quite frankly, more partisan than our legislative delegation is with each other, between Democrats and Republicans. We have a chairman that has decided to, try to stop the contract of a very popular principal in the Brentsville district. Basically tried to lose the man's job over personal differences that this chairman had with that principal. We have a chairman that's renaming schools without even bringing the public into the say of renaming these schools. The local communities in those schools had no say. They weren't even made aware of it. Now we have a school board chairman who didn't even win his election with 40% of the vote. And in Brentsville district specifically, he didn't even break 30% of the vote in that district. And now what he wants to do is basically reverse an election and put a partisan person into a seat where Commander Trenum has put forward 3 very qualified people who aren't involved in politics. They're not members of the Republican committee. They're not members of the Democratic committee in Prince William County. They're members of his district who have worked with him and followed what's been going on in the school board system. That's what we have today, unfortunately, in our school systems here in Prince William County. A chairman that wants to make it purely partisan and not about the students of Prince William County. And that is something we cannot tolerate. Not only for the reputation of Prince William County and how friendly we're going to be considered to both military personnel and veterans, but also to the parents that simply want a quality education for their children. They don't want partisan politics dividing up what's going on with the school board. Thank you very much for being here, and I appreciate your all's sympathies for Commander Trenum and their family as they move forward with this very difficult part in their life.
Thank you, Jackson. So you have now heard from a large number of individuals who represent Prince William County in the Virginia General Assembly. Veterans, all. If you do a simple math problem, they represent roughly a century and a half in the cloth of the country. So they're very qualified to speak to this matter. I would also like, I don't know if Supervisor Lawson had planned to speak, but if you do, the floor is yours. She, of course, represents the Brentsville district, which is also represented by Mr. Trenum on the school board.
Thank you, Delegate Anderson. Good morning, everybody, and I just want to thank you all for being here this morning and showing attention to this very important matter that relates to the Brentsville district. Mr. Trenum and I have the pleasure of serving the exact constituency, and somebody, I think it was Delegate Jackson Miller, who pointed out earlier that Gil was most recently elected. He's been elected for 3 different terms, and the most recent election was at 98%. So clearly the folks of Brentsville district want his leadership and trust his judgment. One thing that has been touched on already by the state legislators that I want to reemphasize: military families meet a lot of challenges with their service, especially when a military spouse is deployed. The Trenums are no different. Michelle works for me. Michelle Trenum works for me. That's not a surprise to anybody. I have seen firsthand what Gil's deployment is doing. Michelle has many things that she has to learn how to take care of in Gil's absence. Sadly, Gil is going to be away for their 25th wedding anniversary. I am asking the school board to do the right thing in this uncertainty for not just the Trenum family, but the Brentsville constituents, and do the right thing and trust Gil's judgment and appoint one of the 3 suggestions that he has made, and do that within short order so that when Gil goes to the Horn of Africa, he can leave knowing that everything is taken care of in the Brentsville district in his absence. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Lawson. We also have with us 4 military veterans, and I'm going to offer them the opportunity to speak. I know that these remarks have been lengthy, but I believe this is a critical issue to which each is privileged to speak. Additionally, we have remained silent on this as it has developed, and this is our first opportunity to address the matter as elected officials. But I'd like to ask if either Mr. McKay would like to speak. If you would, the floor is yours, sir.
I'm George McKay. I spent 26 years in the Marine Corps. Spent a year over in Vietnam, dropping bombs on the enemy, and fortunately had a few good hits. I'll just make it brief. Gil is a good friend of mine. I voted for him all 3 times. The Trenums are good friends of mine. My son and daughter have gone through the Brentsville School District. My son is going to be a senior this year at Brentsville. My daughter's a senior at Virginia Tech. And the idea that this chairman, supposedly nonpartisan chairman, is going to take out of Gil's hands the ability to recommend, and he's giving him 3 choices. It's not like I want that person. It's ludicrous. He's an idiot. He's not nonpartisan. He shouldn't be the chairman of the school board. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Rick Terrell, would you like to speak?
Just a couple comments. Thank you, sir. In industry, when a reservist is called to duty, his job is protected by law. And the same, I think, standard should apply to local government. He's an elected official. I voted for him. I live in his district. He's my voice. And no power should be allowed to take away my voice in the school board or any other local government position. The government should be held to the same standard that industry is when it deals with our reservists that are called to national service. Thank you.
All right, and then Mr. Ashpole, United States Marine Corps, Gulf War.
I just want to say that I respect Gil, his decisions, and the family does not need the distraction. So honor my vote and honor his wishes. Thank you.
Good morning. My name's Steve Botello. I'm a citizen of this great county, and I'm a veteran. I'm a Navy veteran, a Navy frogman. And I'm honored to be in the presence of all these veterans, every one of whom has served. But I will tell you, today saddens me tremendously that we even have to step forward to do this. The citizen soldier has been the core of our country's foundation for over 200 years. To even call into question his call to duty, his willingness to step up, really makes me think twice about the folks that are doing this. Our school board is elected to office. Mr. Trenum, Commander Trenum, has chosen to volunteer to serve our country on more than one occasion. On this initial occasion when he first deployed in his initial service, when he was elected to office by the citizens, and now when he's being called up again. Though the school board has caused this problem, it makes me wonder. They're supposed to oversee, I believe, the 1 through 12 grades, but to act like 5th graders in treating Mr. Trenum, Commander Gil Trenum, this way really saddens me greatly. Thank you for coming out and bringing attention to this issue.
Thank you. Okay, I think that everybody up here has had their say. We will be happy to take questions and answers, and then perhaps some will remain after if members of the media want to talk one-on-one. But I just wanted to say that this is an issue I hear about continually. I cannot hardly walk into a post office, stop at a gas station, go into a drugstore, the grocery store, attend a meeting at a VFW, American Legion, or Disabled Americans Veterans Post and not be approached about this issue. It is a burning issue in the minds of the Prince William veterans community, which numbers just under 50,000. Additionally, we selected this location to speak on this issue because obviously it's a school board matter and it was centrally located to others. But these are publicly elected officials on public property speaking about a matter of public policy. And so with that, we'll be happy to take any questions. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Stacy Shaw with Bristow Beat. So I understand that Virginia law says that Mr. Trenum can keep his position on the school board, but does it say anything about should he be able to appoint someone to take his place or how he should stay in contact with the school board?
What I'll address this, and if anyone else wants to jump in. The Code of the Commonwealth of Virginia says that the school board may appoint a temporary replacement during the period of his absence if he so notifies them formally that he's departing. If he doesn't do that, they have no prerogative to appoint an acting school board representative. It's like that for the school board and multiple elected positions within the Commonwealth of Virginia. He has put forth 3 different names. I don't know the individuals he has put forth. I do know that they have served on his budget committee and therefore understand some of the matters of public policy with which Delegate or Mr. Trenum deals. And so he's put them forth And I believe his perspective is he is comfortable entrusting the care of the Brentsville seat, to which he was elected 3 times in an overwhelmingly large fashion, to someone he trusts. And so therefore he is waiting to see the school board response before he gives official notification that he is departing. I will also say something that has not been said here before, and I should have said it up front, and that is that one of the members of the Prince William delegation to the General Assembly has requested an Attorney General opinion on this, feeling that there is some grayness, if you will, in the Code of Virginia. However, all of us, after reading the plain English language of the code and receiving the advice of the staff attorneys in the Division of Legislative Services, feel like we are on sound ground. I simply don't want to see some contortion in an Attorney General's ruling of the Code of Virginia that tries to trigger what is an improper action.
Delegate, when do you anticipate that opinion to be released?
I do not know. That's up to the Office of the Attorney General. So we'll just have to wait and see when that's released.
Is there any indication that the school board wants to vet at least these individuals Mr. Trenum is asked to take his place?
I don't know. I simply don't know. You would have to ask them. Yes, ma'am.
In the other occasions where there was a treasurer and there was a Board of County supervisor who stepped away from their position, did that person have a replacement? And was that replacement chosen? Who chose that replacement?
To be honest with you, I don't know if those 2 cases resulted in a designated temporary replacement or not. I just know what the opinion of the Division of Legislative Services was, what the opinion of the then serving Attorney General of Virginia was. So I don't know what the final outcome was. Did the seat stay vacant or did the seat become temporarily filled? I don't know the answer. Yes, Delegate Marshall.
Remember when I spoke earlier, when the school board, the elected school boards were set up, we insisted by law that they run as nonpartisans. They may not have D's or R's or progressives or people, anything like that next to their name for a reason. We want the schools to be run impartially without any partisanship. To do otherwise is to, 1, defy the legislature of Virginia, who's been vested with the authority to make such judgments, and is to disrespect the people who live in Brentsville. They elected Gil Trenum. They placed their confidence in his judgment. His judgment is that, properly speaking, please choose one of these 3 people. I think they're all qualified, but you choose. I'll give you one more example. In 2008, there was a member of the Haymarket Town Council who came to me and Senator Colgan. He was going to be not in the United States when his term of office started. Normally, to take the oath of office, you have to be where you are sitting. Senator Colgan and I both introduced bills by unanimous consent, which means they were late, but nobody objected. Senator Colgan did the same thing that I did. We acted in a nonpartisan fashion in a body that can get very partisan. Now, we're simply asking this school board, which was elected in a nonpartisan fashion, to continue to act, if they want the full confidence of the people of Prince William, to act in a nonpartisan fashion.
Thank you. First, Colonel Black, then Sergeant Hugo. Colonel Black.
Let me just add that if the school board is insistent on taking this to its limits, they will force Gil Trenum, while he's on active duty, while he's on the other side of the globe, to cast his votes electronically, which means that everything that he's doing for our nation is interfered with by the actions of this school board. I don't think that it is fair. It's simply inequitable to require him, while he's on active duty, to diminish his effectiveness as an officer on behalf of the United States, because the school board will not treat this thing as a nonpartisan issue.
Thank you, Sergeant Hugo.
Yeah, let me be real brief about this. Here's why we're here today. We're calling on the Prince William County School Board to honor the nonpartisan election that took place in Brentsville District and to honor and respect the United States military. To do otherwise, what they're contemplating doing is nothing but contemptible. And we'll be very direct about that. So thank you for coming.
Actually, that is the message that I've heard from a huge number of veterans, not only in Prince William County, but also other parts of Virginia. Colonel Lingenfeld.
Just to highlight two things, you heard earlier that I think from Rich that people just come up to you and bring this up. You know, sometimes in politics, you know, when you're out there and you're doing issues, you know, you try to get people to talk about your issue. This is not the case in this case. People have read this and they're stunned by it. They're stunned by the fact that here's a guy's getting ready to go over the pond to fight terrorism, and he's strapped with this. It's not right. Look, I think I'm a fairly practical guy. You know, I'm an artilleryman. The only thing I knew about anything before I got in politics was how to blow stuff up. Very practical lifestyle, right? If you're a field artilleryman, that's what you do. Here's what the practical duty of the school board is. Come into session, pick one of these 3 replacements, and then get back to the business of focusing on the kids. That's what they need to do. And if there's anything that delays that process, we'll bet on them.
I didn't mention, both Senator Colgan's bill and my bill passed unanimously. Again, it is the consensus of the General Assembly that school boards should act in a non-partisan fashion. Here's the votes. No dissent to allow an individual deployed to take an oath of office in front of a notary, which normally you cannot do. Why? Because we want people in the military to be able to serve their country and their community at the same time.
And if the worst case scenario does happen and a member is appointed to the board that the people of Brentsville do not agree with, that the Attorney General rules against in a way that is not favorable to what's going on, is there a plan to kind of work with that? Or
I don't speak, Hillary, I don't speak for these gentlemen, but I will say there is quote unquote no plan. We'll cross that bridge. But I can tell you, based on hundreds of veterans that I've talked to, including the state convention of the American Legion where I was a keynote speaker, I had many sidebar conversations from Prince William veterans who were in attendance in that conference in Williamsburg just 3 weeks ago. And there will be a heavy penalty in the court of public opinion. And so with that, what I would like to do is this. We've been out here now for an hour. I would like to conclude the press conference, but many of us will stay back for individual one-on-one conversations. And for those who have to depart and get to their work locations, it'll permit them to do so. So thank you for being here, and we'll be here to talk further if you wish.